Welcome to the Advanced Menu Content tutorial video for Mega Menu. We're going to do a deep dive into some of the advanced features of Mega Menu in this video. So prepare yourself, strap your seatbelt in, we're going in. Okay, first thing we're going to look at is the Insert Menu Items Advanced. You might notice from this demo that I've used on previous videos, it looks a little different and I've removed a couple elements on the end to make some space for this particular video. But everything else is still the same. We're going to head over to the Advanced tab and then Insert Menu Items Advanced. Now, if you're familiar with HTML, this will give you a few more options on what you can do. You might remember from the previous videos, I covered this option for just doing a simple link within the navigation menu. Now we can do the Advanced option. So there's two ways we can add something in, either from a stack or from adding your own HTML code. I'll give you an example of the stack. Typical use would either be an image or some text. So I'll start with the text and show you how that looks. There we go. We've got something called just a line of text there. You could use that for a phone number, a call to action, news, whatever you feel like. And that can either be done before or after the navigation menu. You'll see there's two fields, sets of fields. One is add to the start of the menu, another add to the end of the menu. So if we wanted to put an image instead from our stack, we can choose whichever stack we want. And it'll look something like this. I just grabbed an image out of the file manager. You can use it for a banner graphic, a logo, anything you can think of, a promotion. It's very flexible. You can add as many blocks in there as you want, but it's really not going to fit all that well. Anything further than one line of text and maybe one image. You could do a combination, text and image. It's up to you. Okay, the other way to do it is to add some HTML code. I'll move this out of the way. And let me just copy in some code I've written before. Okay, here's an example of a very basic link I can add myself. So I've just written a standard HTML tag, a tag. Importantly, I put in the class top level A, and that's going to ensure that it gets formatted in the same way as other top level links. I've given some guidance on how to do this with the tooltip. It mentions exactly how to do that. And if I press save, there it is. There's my link up here. So you can do this either at the beginning of the menu or at the end. It's a different block. You can actually add any kind of HTML code you want in there. But one thing to be sure of is you always want to have each element wrapped with a list item or LI tag. And if you don't want to do it yourself, you just check this box, which is checked by default, and you will automatically wrap it in a list item tag. If you want to do the wrapping yourself, you just uncheck that. And if you want to also disable any padding, you can do that as well. But usually I'll leave those two options checked if you're going to do this sort of thing. Right, to remove it, just delete that, hit save. Next, we're going to check out the site search feature. So we'll go back into the edit mode, insert, and site search. So just to do a quick recap from the first video, we can place our site search in several areas. Here is the user guide, particularly the anatomy of Mega Menu section. We're talking about the different components that make up the Mega Menu. We're most interested in these two areas. Number 4, the extras that appears at the end of the main navigation menu, and the info bar, number 5, which appears above or below the menu, depending on how you've set it. So the extras and the info bar are two areas where we can place the site search. You also have the option if you want to put it at the end of the navigation menu. That's totally possible too. So you've got really 3 areas to decide. If you don't want the site search at all, just change that to not displayed, and it's completely hidden. Now I'll explain all the fields. First one is what sort of style you want. You have 2 options, either an inline search where the text field is shown within the navigation menu, or a drop-down menu which uses less space. And if you go with the drop-down menu, you can decide whether you want to have a label with text only, text and an icon, or just an icon only, depending on your preference. If you choose the label, it gives you some a field there where you can add in your own label. If you want to have a keyboard shortcut, if you've got that option enabled, then you can also set that as well. If you prefer to have an icon next to it, you can choose your own. Otherwise, if you don't choose one, a default icon will be set for you. And lastly, you need here a search results page. I've included a link to a guide about how to set that up. This is in the user guide. I've explained the steps step by step. So feel free to have a look at that. You can get to that from following this link. I'll show you what that looks like once the page is out of edit mode. Okay, here's our search tool, and it drops down. I can type anything I want. Oops. And that redirects to the search results page. It's up to you how you want to format the search results page. This is using the core search block that's included in Concrete CMS. Okay, next we're going to get into the members menu. Here under Insert, Members and Login, Logout, you have a lot more options available. So I'll explain these a little bit slower. First of all, we have a placement. Similar to the search tool, we can decide to place it in the info bar, the extras, or the nav menu at the end. Or if you don't want to display it all, just choose that and everything will be hidden. Next, we have the style. There's two main styles. We can just have an inline link if you only want to log in, log out, nothing else. It's not fancy at all. Or if you want to drop down, similar to the search, you have a choice between just showing an icon only, the username, and the custom label. So you have a couple variations there depending on how you want to design, how much space you've got on your menu. And you can decide for this whether you want the members menu to be shown all the time for only logged in users, editors, or the super user, the admin. You've got here field for a member icon. I recommend using SVG images for icons wherever possible. Now, it's up to you how you want to be using these features, but every member menu is going to have at least one feature, which is a login and log out. So this is where you can choose your label for it. If you're using a keyboard shortcut key, it will look like this. And you can optionally add an icon as well to it. So that's login, that's log out. Straightforward. Okay, from this point, the rest of the features are optional, so you have to decide whether or not you want to activate them. This one is to show the register link. If you want to allow users to register on your website, you can choose whatever label you want, something like that, and give it an icon. Now, in order for this to work, you have to enable member registration on your site. There's a link here that will go into your dashboard and gives you the option here whether you want to turn on or off registrations. It also tells you underneath there that if it's enabled or disabled, that way you'll know straight away without going anywhere else if it's going to work okay. Next, we've got private profiles. So this area between public and private profiles is a separate section of Concrete CMS. You'll see down here there's a link for public profiles. That is going to open another window where you can see whether or not public profiles are enabled and whether or not it's going to try to show a menu when you're logged in. If you are going to enable public profiles, I recommend unchecking this option, show the account menu when logged in. So a private profile is when a user can edit their own profile, and also from there you can decide whether you want members to be able to send messages to each other using the Concrete CMS platform. So that's just private, behind closed doors kind of communication. And the separate thing is public profiles. That's the ones that can be seen without anyone being logged onto the website. These kind of features are built into the core of Concrete CMS, as well as the member directory. So these features need to be turned on by default. They're not turned on a brand new website. I've got it turned on this example. But it will tell you down the bottom here if your public profile status is enabled or disabled, and also a link to the dashboard page in order for you to enable it if you want to do that. If you don't want to do that, just leave those boxes unchecked. And lastly, we can add stack contents to the member menu if you really want to take it a bit further. So I've separated into two areas: stack menu for guests and a stack menu for members when they're logged in already. And that content can either go at the top or bottom if it's vertical, or the start or end if you choose for a horizontal layer. I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, here's my member menu. Here's the drop down. These first two links, as well as this text and this image, are all pulled from a stack. And then underneath that, we have the links that are driven by mega menu, the options that we've chosen to edit the profile, view other members in the directory, send messages privately, and then log out. So you can combine this if you want these links to be placed underneath. At the bottom, you can do that. If you want it to be laid out left to right, horizontally, you can do that as well. So you've got a lot of flexibility on how to handle the members menu. One note to point out is because this information is personalized, particularly the logout link is unique for every single user. When you have that option enabled, then some of the advanced caching features from Mega Menu aren't going to work at 100% capacity. That's because if it does cache this information, it's going to show the same links to all users, which we don't want to do. It has to be generated dynamically on the fly, so it will slightly slow down the page loading time. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the most advanced aspect, which is the language switch. Here it is over here. I've got 2 languages set up, English and Spanish. Now, the actual switch itself looks very straightforward and simple, no problems. But setting up a multilingual website on Concrete CMS, there's a little bit more work involved in that. So we head over to the insert and language switch. Okay, now the actual options here are pretty straightforward. There's nothing too complicated here, but I'll explain how the multilingual features work in Concrete CMS. So again, I can choose where I want to put my language switch. It can be the info bar, the extras, the nav menu, or just not display it. I've got an icon, I've got a label for it, and you can decide if you'd like to show the little flags on the drop down. You can choose to disable those if you want. Okay, now if you click on this link, it will take us to the multilingual setup. Just on a side note, I have created a very detailed guide here on C5 Extras about how to set up a multilingual website. So I do recommend checking that out. It's got quite a bit of detail there with screenshots. So you can make sure that you're comfortable and you can come back to that anytime you want. So the first step, if you haven't already, is to set up a new locale. So click on Add Locale, choose your language and country, and it will set that up for you. What this does is it creates another tree in your sitemap structure. Over here in the sitemap, you'll see the first thing is a drop-down list, and that's I can switch between English and Spanish. So they're 2 completely separate trees. Each tree has its own set of pages. Each page has its own attributes and content. So that is how multilingual sites are set up in Concrete CMS. Now, this is where some of the features are a little less intuitive in Concrete, which is how to handle multilingual content from the stacks. For example, if I wanted to have several trees, several languages, then we probably don't want to show the exact same mega menu content in each. And we'll take the members area, for example, that drop down, it had a link to a stack which pulled in some content, but you don't want to show that to English speaking and Spanish speaking people. So we'll head over to the stacks and I'll show you how to handle that. Okay, here is a stack called members menu, and you might recognize this from the drop down. We've got here a page list, and we've also got a bit of text and an image. Now, this part isn't quite as intuitive, and this one, it might take a little while to work out by yourself. But at the very top of the page here, we've got a little drop down. So a stack by default will have one set of content. This is the default content, regardless of what language, what part of the website you're in, whether you're in the English tree or the Spanish tree. But if you decide, okay, I want to copy this stack and make a new version for the Spanish tree, and you click on that, and you can create a localized stack version. Now it will copy, like a duplicate of what you just started with, but then it's a starting point. You can change this and type the same thing in Spanish, for example. I don't write Spanish, so I can't do that. But once you've done that, and you click save and publish, your changes will go live. So when someone on the English structure, the tree structure loads this block, they'll see one thing. When someone from the Spanish side loads this stack, they're going to see a different set of content. The same idea, if we have a look at the global areas, we're going to see the navigation area. This is where I happen to put my mega menu on this site. It's a global area, so it applies everywhere across the site. The naming of your global areas may be slightly different depending on the theme you're using. So if I wanted to do the same thing, have one mega menu for English and a slightly different one for Spanish, then I'll repeat the same process. Personally, what I recommend doing is getting your menu set up initially exactly the way you want it, with all the options turned on, icons, links, drop down, so forth. Get it right, and then you start to make a duplicate. So if I want to now make a Spanish version, I'll click on this and then create the localized version, and I can change some of the menu labels, such as for the search, for the members drop down, for the multilingual site. That makes it relevant and context sensitive to Spanish. Again, refer back to the user documentation I have on c5extras.com, and that explains these steps in a little more detail. So there we've covered the advanced menu content. It does seem a little bit deep, I understand. These are some advanced features within Concrete CMS that is also extremely powerful. You can build all sorts of websites with site search features, with member features, and with language features. Okay, hang around for the next video where we look at the extended menu and bonus blocks, and things get really interesting there.